Why now? Why
Yeah.
is now the right time to do it? Why not 12 months from now? Because if you don't know now, well, then we're kind of wasting our time, because then I won't be able to help you, right?
What, the why now is kind of like, what is your level of intent, right? What do you really want to improve your company? Or are you just kind of, hey, I woke up one morning, I'm feeling a little crappy. I need to reach out to people to figure out if they can help me. And then that intent's kind of short and fleeting, right? Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Mobilization Mindset podcast. I am extremely pumped today to have Jerry Aliberti here from Pro-Accel Consulting. It's a consultant. I'm going to let him kind of tell you everything that he does, but he dives deep into companies, construction companies, and just gets them moving and growing and scaling. So Jerry, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Drew, thank you. And thank you for having me, man. I love mobilization funding. And this is my third podcast for you guys, so I'm pumped.
Third? Okay. Well, hopefully we'll make this one a little bit more interesting than the other two, but really glad to be here. I'm actually really excited to be doing an event with you here in May. That's really exciting with Patrick Sherney. We can talk a little bit about that towards the end. But first question I want to ask is, just tell me a little bit about your background and how it's positioned you really nice to grow your own company and focus on commercial subcontractors. I mean, you've been all over the place in the construction industry. I feel like every single role possible. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the construction industry for over 23 years. 19 of those years was working for self-performed GCs. Yeah, they still do exist, especially in the heavy civil side of the business. I personally managed and ran over $300+ million of my own work, in addition to being a part of several hundred million more when I just started as an assistant super assistant PM. I've also been privileged enough where I ran my own estimating teams, which is not something that a lot of experience that people have in this business. I worked for really large contractors. I managed over $12 billion worth of bids, probably far more. But my single largest project was a $1.25 billion project. Most of my work was in the New York City area and surrounding area. We started dabbling up in the Massachusetts area as well. So a couple of years ago, I took a very untraditional path in this business, right? So being a PM, a super for many years, and also being an estimator for many years, seeing both sides of that critical equation, I broke away, and taking the consulting, advising route and employee training route has been a very natural path for me. I was always that guy where, we want to initiate something new in this business. Let's give it to Jerry to work out the quirks and tell us how we need to navigate this. So it's been an interesting path. I think a lot of our generation is really open to outside perspectives and training. So today with Pro-Accel, I help contractors accelerate business growth. How do I do that? Is either through employee training or operational efficiency advising on the consulting side of the equation.
That's awesome. All right, I'm gonna get to those questions about what you kind of focus on, but I'm interested. You said something interesting. So you spent, you spent 18, 20 years in construction, right? Directly in construction. Then 2022, all of a sudden you say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to go out on my own. I want to be a master of my own destiny. I know that there are tons of listeners out there that have started their own company, subcontracting company, or maybe another type of company that were at one point in a larger company, right? Talk to me about that thought process, because it takes guts to go out on your own, man. I mean, it takes a lot of guts. I mean, everybody listening who owns their own company out there, like, feels that every day. But talk to me about, like, you're sitting at your old company, big company, you got all this experience, and you're like, dude, I want to get the hell out of here. I want to run my own stuff.
Drew, that's an awesome question, because I was with my first company. So I worked for three different companies, ranging from $100 million a year to $1.5 billion a year. And I was with my first company for 14 years. And the last couple of years, I was just, something was hitting me and I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe I just needed to jump ship and change things, right? Well, the grass isn't greener on the other side, not all the time, right? And it was the beginning of my entrepreneurial itch that I just didn't know at the time. So
Mhm.
I made a move. That that next business, I made a move after 1 year again. I said, man, something's going on here. Maybe I just need to go to a really big company, Maybe I
Yeah.
really try that out. So I went to a really big company, and oh boy, was that not the right decision either. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna start betting on myself. I got to a point, and this is where this really gets serious, Drew. I mean, I got to a point where I couldn't even get out of bed in the morning. I was really depressed. I just couldn't take it no more. I was going to work. I was really anxious. I said, this isn't the right way to live my life. I would come home. I wasn't present with my kids. I said, and finally, I just started having those conversations with my wife. And I said, I got to do my own thing. I don't want to
Yeah.
start traditional. I had a concrete business. It was a side hustle. It was a weekend side hustle business. It was really taking off. Like I was
Mhm.
ready to go full time with it. I just didn't know that people like me existed, right? So I didn't want to do
Yeah.
it by myself. So I said, you know
Yeah.
what? I need a couple more years. I still got the equipment. I can always come back to it.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, I took the consultant route. I took the employee training route. I love training. I love training, and I speak the language of all the different positions that I help train, and it energizes me and it gives me a different level of energy as well. And I wanted a remote business as well. All I need is my phone and my computer, and I travel the country. I mean, next week I'm going from West Coast to East Coast to West Coast, and it's pretty cool. It's not always fun to be away from your family, but it's cool.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know, I mean, first off, I have felt all those things that you just outlined, like getting out of bed and asking yourself, what the hell am I doing? What the hell am I doing? Right. And honestly, I felt like that for a number of years, right? Because I was working in larger companies and they were great companies, man. I can't at all complain about them, right? But there's that gut feeling that just something's off, right? And you make that decision to take that leap into something more entrepreneurial and more challenging when the pain of the status quo exceeds the comfort of being in a larger company.
Well said.
And I just woke up. So I totally get what you're saying. And I know there are other people out there that feel the same way. So I would tell people who are listening right now who are working in a larger company who want to bet on themselves. There's probably no better person than Jerry to call, right? So,
Yes.
yeah, thanks for sharing that. And honestly, we're going to do a whole podcast on that, the whole subject matter at some point. So, anyway, okay, let's move gears. All right, so you went out on your own. You got Pro-Accel. When you start an engagement with a specialty trades contractor, um, what does that first interaction look like? What are you trying to accomplish in that first interaction?
Well, first, it's a discovery entry call, right? So it's really on this. We need to get clear on three objectives before we could actually move forward to see if I can even help you and what my services look like for you. The first objective is why are we here? What are your pain points and what are your challenges? All right. So that's the first objective. Then the next objective is what is it actually costing you? Not just financially in your business, but your personal life as well. One of
Yeah,
my longest standing clients told me, Jerry, if I didn't fix these problems, the problems that he explained, he was going to have a heart attack in the next couple of months. His best friend had just had a heart attack as well, who owned a
yeah,
construction business. So, it's not, well, Drew, luckily he's still with us, but it's not just financial, it's also personal as well. Because a lot of people just are completely are on the verge of divorce because of this business. It's really difficult.
yeah,
And a lot of them were suffering with cash flow. And many call me up and say, Jerry, I'm doing really well. I just want to become better, which is
yeah,
another great reason to call me up for as well, right? Call a consultant up. Then the
yeah,
final objective is timing. Why now? Why
yeah,
is now the right time to do it? Why not 12 months from now?
yeah.
Right? Because if you don't know now, well, then we're kind of wasting our time, because then I won't be able to help. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's like that intent level. Like what the why now is kind of like what is your level of intent, right? Do you really want to improve your company, or are you just kind of, hey, I woke up one morning, I'm feeling a little crappy. I need to reach out to people to figure out if they can help me, and then that intent's kind of short and fleeting, right? All right, so they're a customer now. You're on site. You have kind of your first true deep dive. Tell me about sort of the 4 to 5 core buckets that you really focus on to really understand their business and where you can dig in and sort of provide incremental value? Like, what's that first initial view of those sort of buckets? And it might be more than four. I'm just, I kind of
Sure,
think.
yeah. So I tell my clients, I said, listen, you're going to hire me for clarity, right? When you have clarity, you're going to be able to make better decisions. When you make
Mhm.
better, faster decisions, hence my company logo, I help you accelerate business growth, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So that's why you hire someone like me, is because I'm not so close to the operation. So I tell
yeah,
clients, you're breathing your own exhaust every day. You bring me in for that breath of fresh air because you're so in the weeds every day. So typically what I help clients with is, and I tell them, I said, listen, I won't have, hence the reason why I collaborate a lot with Patrick as well is I'm not going to look at your technology stack. I'm not going to look at your CFO and accounting stuff. I want to know about your cash flow. I'm an operations guy. I'm how you get your work, which is your marketing and business development. How do you estimate your work, which
hmm
coming from my background, I can really sink my teeth into that. Okay, now you got the job. Well, how do you close those jobs, right? So how do you pick up your win ratio? And then we
yeah,
go through that whole closing process. Now you got the job. How do you get that job out to your field? I have an entire process on the bid handoff because there's many studies on the internet that show that that's where most projects fall apart.
yeah,
And how do you get your projects up and running? Again, many statistics show the first 20% will dictate the final 80%, right? So let's get that. How do you get that momentum going on your projects? How do you actually execute your projects? And how do you continuously improve on your projects so your reputation is getting built and your company is able to sustain that growth and you have more opportunities coming in? So it's a beautiful cycle. It's a beautiful
yeah, yeah.
360
No,
cycle.
that's super interesting. So you mentioned a couple things there, but like one thing you you leaned in on was that bid handoff.
Yes.
So yeah, talk about talk about some of the pitfalls some of the companies are making in that bid handoff that either cost them money, cost them time, cost them quality. I mean, talk about that process a little bit, some of the pitfalls with some of your customers or just people who aren't your customers that you just know in the industry.
Well, I would say this, the majority of the clients that I ask about a bid handoff, they'll say either, yes, we have one, but we're not doing it efficiently. And then when I ask more questions, their bid handoff is all of about 15 minutes. And
Okay.
then with those who just say straight up, no, we don't. We just
Yeah.
let the field figure it out, which is an old school mindset and an old school mindset that I was a part of for several years. But knowing how badly that messes up projects, I would never advise that.
So
But
if you're not having a bid handoff, what are some of the core risks associated with that? That like some of the core risks that hey, so our listener out there can be like, oh shit, I don't I don't have a bid handoff. I've got tons of issues in my company. What are some of the things if they're listening, they could be like, yep, I have that problem, I have that problem, I have that problem.
Well, really, if you're a labor intensive contractor, labor is your greatest variable. So how are you getting that messaging on your assumptions that you make? So a bit handoff is supposed to take the assumptions, the risks, the logic, the means of egress, the overhead that was spread, the overhead and profit that was spread into what numbers, all of those assumptions need to get out to the field, need to be
Uh-huh.
transferred out to the field. And then you need to understand, like, for example, what's your sub leveling sheet look like, right? So if you have 5 different subs for your concrete work,
Yeah.
you're not always going to choose the cheapest one. Well, why didn't you choose the cheapest one, right? Well, I chose
Mhm.
the one that was third in the stack of five numbers. I've done that plenty of times. There's a reason why
Yeah.
of vendor pricing, right? Maybe you have a particular steel product and you
Mhm.
chose that steel vendor that was more expensive, but their lead time was far less, which was for you to be able to meet your schedule.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, on top of that,
Schedule,
okay, their lead time's far less. You're gonna pay for that excellence and that dependability, right?
right,
And that gives you
exactly.
confidence you can complete your job. Maybe they have better terms. Maybe they're more expensive, but they allow you to pay in 60 days versus 15 or whatever it might be, right?
Sky's the limit with these kinds of conversations, right? And it depends on that particular niche as well. But these are the hundreds of conversations that aren't making its way out to the field, and that's why that bit handoff is so critical.
So who's in that bid handoff meeting?
I would say, well, no, I would say it's got to be the estimator or the estimators that worked on that project. It's going to be the project manager. It's going to be the foreman.
Yeah.
Sorry, the super, and depending on the size of the company and how the company's set up, even the foreman potential. But it's got to
Yeah.
be with intent as well. And you need to set that project up and assign responsibilities. I like to do pre-mortems as well, or what's going to go on in this project. And anybody with
Uh-huh.
any level of experience is going to know what's going to go wrong on a construction project before you even step foot on it. Not
Yeah.
100%, but a lot of it, right? It's all pretty typical.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast earlier today, actually earlier this morning, and one of the guys on the podcast was mentioning kind of this sort of bid handoff process. And he was saying, particularly in smaller companies, have have the field guys, in the pre-construction process and let them have input on it, right?
Yeah. True.
And then when you get to the bid handoff, you're gonna communicate the operating model for that particular project, right? And then those guys in the field who are who are leading those projects then have that buy-in that they were part of that pre-construction process. So
Right.
then you have continuity of the people who are back in the office, people who are in the in the bid handoff, and then obviously once you get out to the field and executing work. I mean that seems reasonable, right?
Well, absolutely. It's something that I certainly preach about as well. I was actually gonna state that this handoff should almost start before you even submit the bid by having your team a part of that. And I'll tell you this: a lot of the larger companies, part of their role and responsibility of being a PM and or even a super is allocating a certain amount of time um, before a bid goes in. So if you're a large company and you're building $100 million projects or even a $50 million project, you'll most likely know who your team is going to be to build that. If you don't have a team to build that, hiring everyone off the street is going to be a little bit of a challenge. Is going to be an extra challenge. I've seen that and I've lived through that myself personally, and it's not easy doing that. You're setting yourself up and you're adding an additional layer of risk.
Yeah, I have a really good buddy on the GC side, a really good buddy who works for one of the large, general contractors that everybody knows, and he's a senior project manager. And I talked to him, and he's like, "I know what project I'm on that starts in 4 months
Yeah. Oh
because
yeah.
I'm part of the pre-construction process."
Absolutely. So,
Yeah,
so the bid handoff actually starts with that, but there are a lot of conversations, Drew, that happens between those especially with a large, more corporate environment. There's a lot of conversations that happens with the senior executives the
yeah,
hours before a bid gets submitted as well.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, that's the same for our company.
yeah,
We
yeah,
got 30
yeah.
employees.
I mean,
Um,
I bid a job once that was $180 million, and we dropped $10 million and within 1 hour before the bid was submitted. Right, so a lot of conversations happen.
Yeah. All right, so you kind of talked about the estimator, right, on the project.
Yeah.
When you start working with companies, what are the primary pitfalls in estimating that you kind of see the common mistakes for and think about these companies that are sort of in that $10 million revenue range to 50-60 million dollar revenue range, sort of the smaller, sort of lower middle market specialty trade contractors.
Well, if you've been following any of my marketing, especially LinkedIn, you'll know I have a sweet spot for estimators because estimating is a very, very difficult side of the business profession, the construction profession, because if you get a job, and the job doesn't make money, it's the estimator's fault, right? If you get a job and they make a ton of money, the project team was fantastic, right? So estimators never get the credit that they get. But one of the biggest pitfalls that I see is a lot of estimators don't really have field experience. And because of that lack of confidence, they're constantly relying on unit prices and they reverse engineer unit prices rather than building crews from the ground up. So I speak a lot about labor intensive
That's
contractors,
interesting. Yeah.
GCs that are typically CMs. All they're doing is just collecting and they're collecting subcontractor pricing. But for labor intensive contractors, they're utilizing unit prices rather than building crews from the ground up. And that comes with confidence, and that comes with experience. So
Yeah.
that's my number one biggest pain point that I see.
Yeah, and obviously the estimators got it fully. That's interesting. You say a lot of estimators don't have field experience. I would imagine a good estimator needs to know the true productivity rates in a human capital intensive sort of project, right? And then understand, all right, the what if scenarios. All right, how does productivity decline, or how does productivity accelerate given a variety of different variables? And I would imagine that should be baked in some fashion, either in the bid, right, from the estimator, or at least leveling expectations to have some sort of cushion, right, for the company bidding that work.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. And they need to be able to communicate as well. So a lot of, estimators are really smart people, but they don't know how to communicate their numbers to explain everything that you just said right now. I had a client who actually knows me from the estimating side of the business when I was working in the construction directly. And he hired me just to help his estimators be able to communicate numbers to him. So he has the confidence to either run with those numbers or cut those numbers without having to go into, he just found himself always having to dive deep into the estimate because his estimators weren't able to communicate properly. Right.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
really important, especially now since the business is really going towards design built.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, that's interesting that you so construction expert dives deep into a client's business, particularly on the estimating side, ends up being a communication therapist.
Exactly.
But
That's
you
what it
know what?
was.
That's any business, man. That's just leadership, right? What do you ever get pulled into? I'm curious, as you some of these subjects like estimating, the bid handoff are very operational excellence, and then obviously field execution, very sort of in the can get in the weeds, right? Which gets you pretty intimate with some of these companies. What are some characteristics of construction leaders? Think about executive level construction leaders, and then we can go down from there that make for really good operators, right? And this could be personality characteristics. It can be expertise, an expertise in a certain area. But what makes a really good construction operator that you've noticed?
In a senior leadership role.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in a senior leadership role. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, being able to okay, so let me say this, and this hits me personally. A lot of people are put in their position because they were just a comfortable ally of the owner and someone who designated them in that position. They don't necessarily have the leadership skills and communication skills fit for that position.
Mhm.
And what I find is if you want to be a great leader, you need to understand that the people that you're supervising are relying on you to make great decisions for the company and for their career ultimately, right?
Uh-huh.
And if they mess up, it's because you're failing them and you need to accept that. I was told in the very beginning of my career, the higher up on the ladder you go in this business, don't
Mhm.
think you're working for less people. You're working for more people. You
Mhm.
need to understand that if the people that you're supervising, providing that you're giving them the resources and you're giving them and you're giving them the support, if they're failing me, it's because you're not possibly asking better questions to help them succeed. Listen, some people just don't have what it takes in this business, right? And yeah, you need to understand when it's time to let go of somebody. But
Mhm.
provided that they're competent enough to be in this business, if they're failing, then you need to ask better questions on why they're failing. And you can't point fingers to the people that you're leading. Because
Yeah.
if I was the owner of a company and my leader was pointing fingers to someone that they're in charge to lead, I would
Mhm.
automatically, put them on the spot in a
Yeah.
professional way, of course.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I mean, that brings me back to an old quote from one of my favorite movies, Remember the Titans. And I think I've said this on this podcast before, but attitude reflects leadership, man. I mean, you can't point fingers to your guys and gals who work for you when the buck really ultimately stops with you. I mean, you set the tone as a leader in your company, and you set the standard too. You set the standard as well. The you mentioned you help customers get work. I mean, I'm assuming that doesn't mean through the form of business development for them. I'm assuming that means through the process of bidding work and how to kind of put your company in a position of leverage, in the best position possible for that particular job. I've said on sort of this podcast a number of times, the construction industry, particularly in the specialty trades, is crowded, man. It's super competitive. Primarily because the barriers to entry generally are pretty low to start a company. Now, to be a good company, I think the barriers are pretty high.
Yeah.
So as you look at companies bidding on work, what are you coaching them on? How are you talking to them about, hey, this is how you should position yourself as a company outside of just bidding based on price?
Yeah, so a lot of these smaller companies, they were everything, obviously, right? And they picked up their couple of projects for the very minimal overhead. And they get to a point where they need to start stepping out of the business to focus more on business development, right? And I think
Yeah.
that is a major pain point and a challenge for a lot of contractors because they're more in their comfort zone when they're out in the field or in the office estimating work,
Mm-hmm.
mainly out in the field. So I had a client who does a lot of service work and wanted to expand their construction side of the business. And this particular owner was flat out and said, "I don't want to join associations. I don't want to go to networking events. I don't want to be the face of the company, although it's my company." Well, that's a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't just hire a business developer and that person who knows nothing about your business is now the face of your company and is going to magically, wave a magic wand and start bringing in the work. You got to put the work in to get that work to you. So
Yeah.
when contractors get more work, it's more about what does your business development strategy look like, and what does a top pursuit look like for your business that aligns with your strengths and your most profitable work.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the contacts and the people we need to go after to get more aligned with your top pursuits,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And that's to the core of what I help contractors with.
I think it's also, and you can talk about this a little bit, it's also knowing what kind of work you want to do.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Not just
You really want
taking,
to be known for it.
yeah, what do you want to be known for, right? You can't be
Yeah,
the best at everything, right?
yeah. Got it.
And in a highly competitive market where pricing is tight, the only way you're going to garner any sort of premium and it is through knowing and sticking to the work you want to do.
Exactly. But you
Yeah.
need to go, and this goes back to cash flow and profit. You need to really get aligned with a good accounting system and an accountant or a CFO or a controller, whatever it may be. I could only imagine that mobilization funding really helps with this as well. Is really what does the data show? Because a lot of contractors think that they would rather go into this type of work because they think that they're more aligned with. But what does the
Yeah.
data show?
Yeah. Yeah.
What projects are really making you the most amount of money? That is a
Yeah,
top
and
two.
honestly, that's where like someone like Patrick can help too. And you
Sure.
got everybody on the podcast will meet Patrick. But I mean, even from mobilization funding standpoint, dude, we can get super creative with customers. I mean, we're not a one size fits all sort of product. However, we can only get as creative as the data shows. From a financial standpoint, if your financial data doesn't even make sense, right? It's hard for any company and any loan program to get creative. And it's kind of the same with your ability to bid on projects and get creative in that way. If you don't know your own data, how do you even know what your starting point is, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Drew, one of the first things I'm going to ask is what does data show? You want to go get a bond? The bonding company wants to see what the data shows, right? They want to pull money from mobilization funding. Well, what does the data show?
Yeah.
Right? You want
Yeah.
to accelerate in business growth. If you want to grow and scale sustainably,
Hmm.
every business partner that you bring in to help you grow is going to ask for that essential data.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And just as well as like operational excellence and sort of new business excellence, kind of what you focus on. I mean, I know it's overhead, I know it's back office, but financial discipline and having your financial house in order is equally as important because it supports everything that Jerry focuses on. So,
Mm.
it's, having all that in tandem is extremely important. Um, when you is there any difference sort of in your approach if you come in with a $150 million sub versus a, $20 million sub, or are the fundamentals the same?
Typically the fundamentals are the same. I mean, I just picked up two clients recently, and they're both 200+ million dollar a year contractors. And to the core of the work that I do, it's team alignment, right? Everybody talks about SOPs, SOPs this, SOPs that. Like, we're in a business that requires so much creativity. You don't want to turn your people into robots, right?
Yeah.
It's like you got to hire based on competency. You got to hire based on someone's skills.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, of course, there's a way that we should be doing a change order. There's a way that we should be submitting a pay requisition every single month. That you could put an SOP on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you can't be hiring that. You need to build and train competence in your business, and you need to hire properly with a good onboarding process,
Yeah.
and you need to set those people up for success. And that's where
D
I come in, right?
Yeah, dude, I'm only laughing because I've been at mobilization funding for 15 months, call it, a year and a half. And, it was about 3 or 4 months. I'm laughing because this is transferable to any business, right? I came in and there was there was a challenge, an operational challenge that we were having, and I outlined to the T a process that our people could follow and that they had to stick by. And I went to Scott and I'm like, I got the best process, man. I just engineered this thing to a T. I solved, like, we're going to freaking Mars, man. And he looks at it and he's like, what the hell is this, dude? He's like, this is a people business, man. We don't want machines. We do not want
Ah,
machines. And,
exactly.
if you do, another point that I learned there, and I'm sure you teach the same thing, is if you do create a process, maybe don't roll all of it out at once. Drip it to see if certain parts of the process work and don't, because you're gonna create a learning cycle there where you're gonna avoid larger pitfalls, right? If you fail quick and you fail cheap.
Absolutely. And my advice when you're implementing something new is, one, you start with your initial team that's going to adapt to it the best, and they become
Yeah.
your cheerleaders and help you work out the quirks. As I was in many of the companies that I worked for. And then from there, you use that team to expand it to another team. And it becomes, it you roll it out faster that way. And
You
just
do.
point that I want to make is that when you implement change in a business, you have to understand something, that feeling like it's actually working against you and feeling paralyzed is a normal process to change. Change
Interesting.
6 months to a year, and if you're a large company, over a year to see the true ROI of it. So feeling paralyzed and feeling like, because everyone's getting out of their comfort zone. You're breaking
Mhm.
old habits, true. People
Mhm.
aren't going to be comfortable with that the first couple of weeks, the first couple of months. It's
Yeah.
going to take several months. And that's why you start slow and you slowly expand and you build your cheerleaders out and you let them understand you're going to feel like we're paralyzed. You're going to feel like we're moving backwards. We got to look long term on this process.
Yeah, dude, I'm a simple guy, and I take a lot of this stuff and I make sort of these analogies. I mean, if you haven't worked out for 20 years, getting up in the morning to work out is
There you go.
super, super painful. You know you have to do it.
Perfect
You
example.
know you have to do it.
And it's going to
But
hurt.
those first 2 weeks are painful. I'm like, I'm getting up at 6, going to the gym. I got to go to work after. And then all of a sudden, after 2 weeks, you start seeing results and you start feeling better, and it becomes a lot less painful. And then all of a sudden, it becomes a habit, right? That's the same as the operating model. I mean, there's certain changes here that we try to make, and I just do them in kind of one little sector of the company, see if it works. And it's less painful, right? But anyway, um, Jerry, if there's anything before we get out of here, if there is anything that you could tell our audience right now, or a piece of advice, or just any tidbit at all, what would it be?
Oof. Wow. That's a big question. Uh, this is probably the hardest business in any of the businesses out there. You can't do this stuff by yourself. Okay. You need a good team. You need to hire a good team. If you're really small, your first couple of hires are going to dictate the future of your company very quickly. If you're a larger company listening to this, you need to understand that those that you promote and the way you treat your people and the culture you have in that business and the way you nurture those employee relationships is going to mirror how they treat your projects and your customers as well.
Awesome, Jerry. Last thing I want to talk about. So you and Patrick Sherney, we're going to be, and us as well. We're going to be hosting a Builder to CEO Cash Flow Accelerator Summit May 13th and 14th. Link is in the bio. We're really excited about hosting people here in Tampa at our office here. But this is really Jerry and Patrick's event. Jerry, can you talk a little bit about the event? Just kind of outline what expectations and get people hyped up before it, because we want to fill this thing out.
Yeah, no, exactly. So we want to tap this at 30 contractors. We want it to be large enough where there's enough feedback from multiple contractors, but small enough where it's intimate. We're going to have a Zoom call about a few weeks before the event just to start to get to know each other. We're going to have a cocktail hour and a dinner the night before we start the 2-day workshop at Mobilization Funding's office. So everyone is going to start that workshop already knowing each other, very comfortable. And then Pat's going to talk about the 7 financial critical numbers that every contractor needs to know to master their cash flow. And as he states, to become a millionaire contractor. And then I'm going to reverse engineer those numbers on how operations needs to reflect to make those companies, to make those 7 numbers successful. And of course, not everything's going to be perfectly aligned, but I'm going to add as many, any additional nuggets as well. You're going to be speaking and doing a full-blown cash flow demo with your team. We're going to have, our other sponsors and, from Christensen Group, and they're going to talk about the alternatives where many contractors could save tons of money on insurance, which is a major topic of discussion in the business. And then what better way to wrap it up with a fishing trip in Florida, right? So we're gonna walk away with a solid network, and I'm really pumped. We got some really cool people coming.
Yeah, we're super excited too. So you guys heard it. Solid networking with fellow folks in the industry. You're going to learn a hell of a lot, operational, financial, cash flow, business strategy, the whole 9 yards. It's going to be great. Jerry, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. This has been an awesome podcast. I can't wait to see you in May. And for the folks out there, thank you for joining the Mobilization Mindset. This is Drew signing it off. Have an incredible day.